Welcome back. Cigars Podcast. This is your host, Tyree here. You got my brother Muhammad to my left.
What's good?
And the title of the video is, Can Arranged Marriages Save the Black Community?
Yeah, I think this is an important topic. Just looking at the current landscape of the black community, we wanted to figure out what could be a solution to helping out what's going on currently within the black community. And this is a good question. Can arranged marriages save the black community?
So
let's get into it.
They wanted to, how did I arrive at that question, right? I arrived at that question when I began to ponder the state of my people. I look at us socioeconomically, right? And I see that we are at a deficit. We are very much behind. Yeah, so I look at the marriage rates, and I look at the youth. I look at the incarceration of our young males, and it seems that every problem that the black community has can be traced back to the family structure and how and what environment they were raised in, right? So I look at the cultures, the communities that are succeeding, and I see that they prioritize family and they prioritize marriage. So I think it's safe to say that if you want to become better as a whole or as a community, that we should too prioritize marriage. When you look at 1 in 4 black women will marry in their lifetime, that's the current statistic. When you look at 80% of women initiating divorces, I begin to wonder if so many women are dissatisfied with their choices that they're making, should they be making these choices alone? Because if family is necessary for saving the black community, which I think we can agree at this point that it is, then how do we get back to that point, right? So women shouldn't be ultimately picking their husbands alone, is what I've. Well,
Or should they?
Yeah, I'd rather ask because I understand that for the black culture, this might be extreme, right? Especially Western, American, whatever you want to call it, where we are now here.
Foundational black Americans?
Whatever you want to call westernized black, we're in America. So I understand that this might sound extreme, but it's something to be considered. Like, should we allow women to pick husbands alone if they're divorcing at such a high rate? I wanted to actually play something to kind of springboard this conversation and kind of allow us to flush this topic out a little bit better. So here it is.
I get a lot of calls from my relatives. Hey, why are you still single?
I was arranged at the age of 24. I had just passed my CPA exam. I wanted to freaking breathe, swim, dance, and they were trying to set me up.
My mother, for instance, I usually tell her that if I don't end up finding anybody for myself, just get me somebody, The first thing that she's going to do, that they're going to look into their own caste. This goes from one relative to another. Do you have somebody in mind? I am giving you 100%. The girl is never going to like what the mother gets. She was never going to like.
Think about arranged marriage as a official Tinder app for parents. Basically, your parents swiping left and right instead of you.
The basic criteria of arranged marriage is essentially education, money. And no womanizer is what they use, right? And in a girl, you also add slim, fair, pretty. Where they miss arranging properly is taking personalities into consideration.
So the reason why I play that is because even in cultures where they are thriving and there is arranged marriage, the women still don't necessarily like it, but they comply because they understand that it's beneficial to the community. And when you see the foundations, you heard what she said, the foundations that their parents are picking on is not the same foundation that women are picking on traditionally in Western American culture. She said education, she said money, and she said no womanizing, which I think agreeably are 3 key components for a man to have if he wants to be in a long-term committed marriage. Most marriages in America are predicated on love or built upon the foundation of love. I have to love this person, and that's not working. So this I play that and say, like, listen, there, even in other cultures there might be some pushback. These women don't necessarily love the idea of arranged marriages either, but the willingness to sacrifice for the community, for the betterment of the community, is something that I pull from that. So that's just something that I just wanted to play because it was just interesting to me.
Yeah.
So then I wanted to look at this list. There was a list. I don't know if you know, it was a list like of top 10 reasons why black women will not marry. It's like a viral list. I don't know if you heard about it, but I'm actually going to pull it up now. And I wanted to look at some of these things that they say on this list and kind of break them down, see if you agree or disagree. I wanted to go over this list and see if we could kind of look at some of the reasons why they say black women have the lowest marriage rate, right? I mean, whether you agree or disagree, we could see that.
This is what's put out there. This is not coming
No,
from
yeah,
us.
this is a list. We're going to put
Right,
the list
so-
on the screen. So,
yeah.
look, essentially, I'm going to read it first, and then we can kind of break it down one by one. So, it's 10 things. It's a list that's been going viral, I guess, on TikTok. And it's like, why do black women have the lowest marriage rate? So we have number 1 being a nasty attitude and disposition. We have number 2 being uncooperative and opposed to leadership. We have 3 being masculine, lacks femininity. We have 4 being don't value their virtue. Number 5 being don't prioritize fitness. 6 being disregards global ethnic image or ethnic image. 7 being an egotistical person or being someone who rejects criticism. Or, yeah, it's like weird how they write it. 8 being no loyalty, unwilling to invest/build. And 9 being doesn't tend to a man's ego. And 10 being has no grounded sense of healthy submissiveness. Now, we start at the top. When you say, I've heard that black women are general. Do you feel like you experience black women having a worse attitude than any other type of women you've encountered? Because you actually do date women of all cultures and nationalities, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is some truth to it, considering the fact that a lot of black women, unfortunately, grew up in single-parent households, right? So if you don't know what a strong masculine father looks like, you won't respect masculinity. But I just want to go back a little bit just to say one thing. You know, when you compare the state of black people during, I would argue, more times where things were more racist, right? You had Jim Crow, you had segregation. At a certain point, black people were the most married people in America, right?
Right.
And also at a certain point, and the statistics are out there, black women were the most married women in America. And when you look at that, where we had 2-parent households, right? Children were raised with a strong foundation. We were able to bridge the educational gaps, especially in Jim Crow South. We were more of a peaceful people. They were going to church. They were getting dressed up in their Sunday's best. Kids weren't out gangbanging. So are we capable of doing it? Yes, we are capable of doing it. So I would think that back in those times, women were more friendly, women were more compliant within their families. I strongly believe that women tended to embody more femininity because they fortunately had a chance to grow up in a household with a strong masculine father. So I do agree with that to a certain extent, Ty. I do.
You know, I'm not even going to go through the whole list, each one by one, only because when I look at the list, and the list should be on the screen right now, if you look at most of these things, let's say uncooperative, opposed to leadership, masculine, I always like to ask why, right? Every time someone does something, I think the best question in the world is why, right? For anything.
Yeah.
Why
What's
is
the-
like,
what's the cause of
like the
that?
biggest question to me, like the why. Kids ask, it's funny because kids always, why?
Why?
To me,
Yeah.
that's the most important. If you understand why something is, you probably can understand how to counteract it or combat it, right? Why?
Cause and effect, right?
Right. So when I see nasty attitude and all of these things on this list, it goes back to women tend to act more masculine when they feel unprotected and when they're not around masculine men. I think one of the things that masculine men do is preserve femininity by protecting or shielding women from the responsibility of life. I think
So what
that,
you're saying is the more responsibility a man takes on, the less responsibility a woman has, the more feminine
she
she's
can
able
be.
to be, right?
I believe that, and
Okay.
yes. So when I see some of the
I mean,
most
that makes sense.
some of the most feminine women I have seen have some of the toughest, roughest, most masculine fathers. And I believe that when a woman feels safe and protected, she's not going to have an argumentative, combative, nasty attitude. I believe that she is more open to the idea of proper leadership from a man. I believe that she will be more accepting of criticism. All of these things on this list.
But Tyreek, quick question. Remember we were talking, and I said to you, I said, whenever I propose the idea of arranged marriages, not just saying arranged marriage for the sake of arranged marriage, I'm saying this is something that could potentially help the black community to take us out of a state of dilapidation, right? You know what they tell me? Hell no, I'm not letting nobody arrange my marriage. I would never. Right, but then the question that you asked too was like, do you respect your father? What kind of relationship did you have with your father? Right, what kind of bond did you guys have? Do you trust his decision making skills? Now, if a woman was raised in a household without a father, he was there sometimes and not fully there for her, didn't support her. How can we expect, right, a woman to trust her father's judgment in picking the man that she potentially will spend the rest of her life with?
Even on top of that, if we understand that the last few generations were raised by single mothers, there's not even a man around to pick.
But why are these women picking these men that will ultimately lead them into a direction of being a single mother?
No, well, I come from this. I want you to approach this from a place of sympathy. I know you have a hard time doing that sometimes because you're a very competent person, so you're very hard on people. I don't blame a woman for not being able to pick a proper man if she doesn't know what one looks like. So I don't put this on women. Everyone's responsible for their choices, but understanding how when you don't have the proper information to make the correct choice, I believe that's almost as being like trapped to make a bad choice. If that makes sense. What I'm saying is if you don't have proper information to make a good decision, you probably won't make the good decision. It's not even so. I don't blame women for not being able to pick their husbands properly when they haven't had a sense of what it is to feel protected by a man. And there are a lot of women who've gone through many things where they've been let down by men, usually because of their own personal choices. I give you an example.
But what about good fathers who are used as leverage, right? Or they're used just to get back, right, at that man, and that ultimately ends with that man not being able to be around his child, his children. What
So
about
are
that
you
case?
saying like when you saying when women intentionally keep the kids away from the husband?
Yeah, what if there is a good father, but she leverages, the resources that she has to keep that man away, and then the young child doesn't get a chance to build that bond with the father.
That's unfortunate. But I don't want to. Okay, this is why I say when I say arranged marriage, we're not gonna do arranged marriages in our community. I just believe that you should have some help outside of yourself, especially women, on finding out what a masculine man is and what a good man is, because oftentimes you didn't see a good man, so your understanding of what's masculine is very primitive and juvenile. Sometimes women mistake thugs for being masculine men. Not all, certain thugs, because he's capable of violence, or she might feel protected in his presence, but that's maybe not necessarily the best man to build a long-term future with. I think oftentimes because you don't know what masculinity looks like and you crave masculinity naturally, because this is what you're born to do as a woman, you're going to try to find substitutes. So, like I said, the emotional gangster guy, he might feel like he's a protector or something like that until he puts his hands on you. Or you might feel like that's a version of masculine until you go through whatever. You know what I mean? So, like I said, I don't want to come from this as a way of attacking women. I just don't think that's going to work anymore. I don't think that this podcast is going to the thing that makes us different is that we're looking for solutions. So I just want women to consider, I'm not saying it has to be this way. Some of you don't even have a father to pick that man for you. But should you consider getting help in picking the man for you? Because it's a big decision.
It is. It is.
Eh.
And like you said, the divorce rate is up. Not just black women, but women in general initiate 70% of divorces. So the men, most of these marriages are from marriages, that stem from the woman picking the man themselves, not
Right.
from arranged marriages, right?
Right.
Because we're talking about within the United States. Not to say some are not arranged, but I would assume most are not arranged, and they still end up in the divorce. So how do we introduce this idea? Because whenever I introduce this idea, I get pushback. So how do we intelligently introduce this idea, letting them know that this could potentially not just benefit you, but the greater good of our community? And do they even care about the greater good of the community as a whole, or are we just too much of an individualistic minded people that we don't care about what's good for the community? We just care about what we want.
So
Right.
I think that in order for two people to work together, especially when there's opposition or points of tension, is that in order for that person to want to listen to you, you have to validate their emotions first. So I think we as a whole need to understand that there are men, not all men, but there are men in these women's life that have let them down. That's not all men's fault. But you have to understand that a woman who has gone through feeling let down by men ultimately develop qualities of being the man that she wish was in her life to protect her.
So, all right, so here's another question. Do we focus more so now on women who don't have that trauma, right? I would think it might be easier to introduce arranged marriages, right? The family introducing an arranged marriage to a woman who's much younger, right? Obviously of legal age,
Right.
but yet hasn't, went through all of that trauma. Because a lot of times, what they say is easier to raise a child than it is to repair a broken man, right? So maybe if we introduce that to, our people at younger ages, they'll be more understanding and accepting. And if you look at other cultures and communities, they tend to get married younger, right? And I
Right.
think that within the black community, if we just introduced it to them in a way that it didn't just force it down their throat all at once, but just put little pieces of information about how beneficial it could be, I think that might work.
What I think needs to happen, I agree, right? But what I think needs to happen is the older women of our generation and the generation before us, I guess your generation, they need to come out and explain to the younger women why the choices they made weren't the right ones, right? I think we are in a generation full of broken people, so these broken people are going to have to get together, right? We're going to have to figure out how to sift through the rubble and because we can't just stop procreating. So eventually we can build children who are more healed than we are, but we are as far as like relationship wise, we're at odds at each other because I think it's a war that's been going on.
Yeah, we have to fix our culture from the basement, from the ground. We can't start at the top, right? We got to start from the root. I mean, just the whole culture. I think it needs a change up, right? Like understanding that it's not cool to champion being a single mother. There's nothing cool about that. It's nothing that you should be bragging about. Now, if you are a single mother and you're handling your business out of necessity because you have no choice, that's good. But we should normalize even being raised in a 2-parent household, marrying before you carry. These are the things that we should normalize, and I think that we don't normalize those things. Where other communities, they normalize those things. And if you look at the most thriving communities, if you look at the Nigerians, they come here. Either you're a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or you're a failure. Like education is a standard that's expected, right? And those cultures have 2 parents. They prioritize having 2 parents. When you look at a lot of people within the country of India, they prioritize being married as a duty and a responsibility, not out of love and feelings. So I think that we need to start from the bottom to have a better understanding on what marriage is about. Marriage shouldn't be about, oh, I love him or I love her. Love is something that can be built on top of duty and responsibility first, right?
Absolutely.
And then when you get married, the reason why you're getting married is to have children in a stable 2 parent household environment. The mother being the lover and the nurturer, the father being the disciplinarian, and the person to guide the family towards the right direction. So I just think we have to change our mind first.
True.
Right?
And you
Like-
said something key, and it's something that I also wanted to kind of bring up.
I care about my people, man.
I mean, that's ultimately
I really
why
do.
we're talking about this,
I really
right?
do.
Like,
It's
I'm
sad.
coming
It's
from
sad.
a place of care because, you know, you ever have a situation where you and your brother are arguing, and then somebody on the outside says something about your brother, and then you kind of direct your energy towards them because, like, nobody can talk about my brother other than me?
Yes, yes.
I go in the comment section, and I see how people view us as a whole, like our ethnic image.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah, like when I see, and then these are just racist ass fucking people.
Ethnic image. Let's talk about that. I like that.
Yeah, but these are just racist people in the comments just talking shit. But when I hear them say, black people are killing black people commit majority of the crimes, a lot of these statistics they're pulling from are fucking wrong. But black people commit majority of the violent crimes and all of these things.
But there's some about. Listen,
No,
here's the thing too.
but this is what I'm saying. Listen, let me finish what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. When what I like about how the enemy will always expose your flaws, right? And this is how you know what to work on. What the people are saying, although it's probably skewed and not accurate, there is some validity to what they're saying. There is some truth to saying that we are destroying ourselves. There is some truth to what they're saying about all the single mother and baby father apps. There's truth to this. Although there are good black men, there are plenty, but we as a whole are failing. And
we are.
And I listen to those people and I go, well, okay. It's crazy because like I want to talk about the women, but then I'm like, I don't want to do it in front of these people because they're fucking. I'm not gonna validate them. But they're saying what they're saying is true. And when I look back and think like as a whole, we're losing, bro.
But when I'm in front of people not of my race or not of my culture, when they bring up things, I initiate the conversation and lead it in a way to let them know I know what the problem is. I rather be the man in the room where you can just be honest and real about it, and I'll tell them.
I don't think there's anything wrong with what they're saying.
No, but what I'm saying, Tyree, is that
it is something wrong, but I think that there's truth there.
But hold on, but there's a big difference, right? When a person just points out a problem, and then when a guy like me tells them, right, the reason for said problem and what was done to create that problem. Let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about why the black community was destroyed. What happened? The Welfare Act, right? Mm-hmm. Once they put welfare into the black community, that incentivized the black woman to kick the black man out of the house because what he was bringing was supplemented by the government. Then you create a situation where labor is separated from income. Mm-hmm. You incentivize laziness. Why do I need a man in the house when I still get money? The money that he was bringing into the house, I can get the government to give me that, right? Mm-hmm. Then when you look at the feminist movement, when you look at Gloria Steinem and what she did and how intricate she was within the white feminist movement for white females, right? And how many black women followed that game plan, and that created that created animosity amongst the black men and black women. Now understanding that we were stronger together than we are apart, and the lack of respect for our elders. What I've noticed, Tyree, is that when I'm around other people of other cultures and races, they might have a rebel spirit. They might have the whole Americanized mindset at times, but when it's time to get serious and get back to business, they listen to their parents, mm-hmm. and we don't. I think that we strayed too far away, and people say, "Hey, we have no culture because we were brought here to America. Our ancestors were slaves. We don't have any culture to draw from." I disagree. I think we have a strong culture of black people during the 50s and 60s and in the 1940s. We were still together. We were in unison. We were doing things together. We were married more. We were having kids in two-parent households. We weren't as violent, right? There was no gangbanging. We weren't destroying our communities, and we were forced to depend on ourselves, right? During a time where there were more racism, during a time where there were Jim Crow, segregation.
Right.
As a whole, economically, we were doing better then. Right now, like I said before, like I always tell you, you have some black people doing better than some other black people today. But back then, as a whole, we were winning. And when you look at other communities, it's not about individuals. It's about what's good for me is good for the greater community. And we have to have that mindset. so as that we can move together and have a brighter future. But if people are not willing to even listen to the idea of arranged marriage, instead of just being reactive and saying no, I would rather people say, hey, I might not agree with it, but present me some facts and how could it benefit our community, and let's talk about it. We need to start even having discussions. It's not about convincing everybody right away to do what you're proposing. What it's about is starting the discussion.
That's what we're doing now.
Yeah.
I'm just posing the question. I mean, there's a lot of what you said, right? And you stated a lot of things that we have to go into, I guess, at a later date. Like you talked about Gloria Steinem, and you talked about the feminist movement. You talked about the Welfare Act. You kind of roughly hinted at the economic castration of the black male, which took him out of the house. These are all, and let's be clear. These things don't only affect the black community, but they affect us the most. And because I am a member of the black community, that's all I care about. There's an idea that segregation actually was better for us because we had our own neighborhoods. There was more incentive for people to diversify their career pursuits, because in order for there to be a black dentist or a doctor or something, someone has to go to school for that shit.
Yep.
They also say that your ability to see different social economic classes within your own neighborhood can also be beneficial to children. Mm-hmm. So like a child of like a lower economical class or whatever, seeing like a doctor in their neighborhood, a black doctor, they could, that being close proximity to different levels of income it was also beneficial. I've actually heard and been watching stuff recently. What I'm saying is, I just want us to consider, how do we get out of this deficit as a whole and stop losing on the grand scale of the world? Just starting the conversation. I want people in the comments to talk about it. And like, how do we save the black community? I think it's family. I think it's marriage. And I think that we should look into having somebody help you pick your husbands.
Yeah, and it's the funny thing too, is that even though a lot of people fought for integration, we're still segregated. Isn't that crazy? When you think about it, if you look around America right now, there are black neighborhoods, there are white neighborhoods, there's neighborhoods predominantly where people are Spanish speakers, there are Indian neighborhoods. So we're still segregated, but we're not segregated.
Our communities aren't segregated. See, the thing is, we let people infiltrate our communities.
No, what I'm saying is that we're still segregated as far as there's schools that are predominantly black, right? There's schools that are predominantly white. There's neighborhoods that are predominantly one kind of people.
But it's based off of social economic class.
Exactly. But what I'm saying is that
it's still segregation, because if most of the people of this race is at this social economic class, they're going to go to this school.
No, but that's my point. What I'm saying is that we fought for integration so much, but we're still segregated. But we're not segregated on our own terms.
Integration was dangerous for the black community because we became accepting of too many things from the outside that came in and allowed us to be destroyed. I mean, the way that like you said, the feminists, we need to actually end this, but the way that the feminist movement infiltrated the black community was by convincing the black woman that she didn't need the black men. Yeah. We've been infiltrated in so many different areas, and I'm not just going to put the blame on the outside folks, because it's up to us to counteract that. But we have to understand that this is kind of an orchestrated thing. It's not, the destruction of family is and American culture as a whole is something that's going on. It's just that we're getting the worst end of it. And
but in order to do better, we have to understand where we're failing and correct those mistakes. And it starts with doing something today, right? And not thinking about what happened in the past, but understanding the past can affect the future, and understanding from the mistakes. But
if your game plan isn't working, you have to consider some other options. Sometimes they're extreme, but we should consider doing something else. That's it for today. It's been great having you guys here. Like, comment, and subscribe. And we're out of here.
The Guys Podcast, Capture Media.